Well, hi, once again, I'm Tom Bullington here with Everybody Loves Politics, and today we have a great show. We're going to talk about lots of things, the GOP possibly breaking up with the whole Speaker of the House debacle. We're going to talk about foreign policy a little bit, and of course, the presidential race. And with me again today is Michael Brodkorb, a Republican activist as well as a Star Tribune columnist. Michael, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on again.
Yeah. You know, we've heard so much about Speaker Boehner and how he compromised with Democrats. And you know, you can be either agree with that or not, but a lot of Republicans, especially Tea Party Republicans, are thinking that they don't want to compromise with the Democrats. They don't want to maybe slip some things in that President Obama would like. And do you think Paul Ryan, either he kind of goes into that role thinking, boy, I need to compromise, and then he's unsuccessful, or if he doesn't compromise, then he can't get anything done with the full House? So it's really, he loses each way, correct?
It's a no-win situation,
right,
really, for Congressman Ryan. Ultimately, politics is the art of compromise, as we've discussed on multiple occasions. And when there is a responsibility on the Speaker to represent the institution of the House of Representatives, it's not being majority leader. It's not where he's necessarily representing just one political party. The Speaker has a responsibility to work with the Democrats, work with the other caucus leadership, both the minority party and the majority party, and negotiate and work together. Unfortunately, inside the party, the concept of working together in that type of way, at least inside the Republican Party, that's not a path for success, not a path for long-term success, because Republicans have worked themselves into such a position that negotiating in any type of way is a sign of weakness, and that's just unfortunate. Where you see this at the state level, and you see this at the national level now, where you have Republicans anyone who works inside the branches of state government, who works within the offices and works within the guidelines of negotiating bills, presenting a work product at the end, there's just no path for them, and that's unfortunate. Right. That's really unfortunate.
Right. Now, you've worked at the state level in government, and you've seen compromise happen. With the DFL, for example, do you see that this has national implications for you said the brand, the Republican Party brand? Does it have national implications at the state level in Minnesota, or does it pretty much stay to the federal party?
It's unfortunate, Tom, but it really does have implications. What you see right now at the local level here in Minnesota is you see someone like Speaker of the House Kurt Dowd, who is under repeated criticism from people inside his party. Members of the Tea Party, other groups out there that are out there organizing mailings against him and other type of things. There is a very quick comparison, an easy comparison that can be made, unfortunately, to someone like Speaker Dowd, who is in a position, in control of the House of Representatives. Again, he's not the majority leader of the Republicans, and he's not the minority leader of the Democrats. He is the Speaker of the House, and he has to negotiate with Senator Bach and with Governor Dayton and try to represent the good fight in those type of negotiations. It's very difficult because the expectation, I think, amongst Republicans is that working within the confines of that process and negotiating, it's very difficult for a Republican to ever come out ahead, because I certainly saw in previous years where the concept of just shutting the system down and throwing a wrench in the system is far more attractive to Republican Party activists and a lot of people inside the Republican Party, because they loathe so much the concept of government and the role that government has, that any type of responsible leadership within the branches of state government or in the branches of federal government, you're looked upon as someone who is a sellout in producing results. And ultimately, what I think the Republican Party has to decide, both at the national and state level, is whether they want to whether they provide a path for any one of the elected officials at the state level or at the national level to come out ahead if they work. Because what they seem to reward right now are those that want to throw the bombs, those that want to shut down the system, rather than those who want to actually produce against results. And I would say there are a lot of comparisons between both Speaker Dowd and what you see in Congressman Ryan. You have two Republicans that recognize where the brand of the party is, what needs to be done, but they're also very realistic about what can be accomplished in the system. And for far too long, Republicans have made perfect the enemy of great. And unfortunately, they have to realize that politics is truly the art of compromise.
And you mentioned the mailings, Michael. I know here in the Hastings area, Representative McNamara was a target of a mailing from, I believe it's a PAC called Liberty, Minnesota. And I got one in the mail, and it's very unfortunate that he was a target of that. And I looked at it and I thought initially that was maybe a DFL mailing, but no, it was he's not conservative enough, and he spent too much, or he did things that were more compromising with the DFL. And I just felt that was really unfortunate to see. They're going after this group is going after good, centrist Republicans, moderate Republicans who have shown the ability to reach across the aisle, and it sounds like they're going to continue. They have some money behind them.
Yeah, they do. They have some money behind them, and they have some of these folks that are outside the party that have, as I said before, made perfect the enemy of great. And until you raised the question, until you made the comparison, I hadn't thought about it, what's going on in Washington, but I can't believe I missed it now, because your point is so well taken, is that what you're seeing at the national level in terms of the dysfunction in Washington and the unwillingness of someone to lead, that could very well be what happens here in Minnesota, because when you have groups out there that have just a limited focus, and their objective is on making, to repeat again, perfect the enemy of great, there's really no margin or opportunity for someone like Speaker Dowd or a Congressman Ryan to win in that type of environment. That type of ideological purity really removes any negotiating room for anyone to come out ahead.
What's the end game here? I mean, where does this end with the national demographics changing dramatically? You already have Republicans almost at a disadvantage in presidential elections with various groups that are traditionally Democratic voters increasing in population. And now you have a schism in the Republican Party itself, making it even more difficult for a national politician to succeed. You have a Ted Cruz and a Jeb Bush, and then you have a Donald Trump character. And to have, like you mentioned on the last show, to have a Donald Trump and a Jeb Bush and a Marco Rubio, those three get together, and Ted Cruz get together in a room and come out with a nominee. That's not going to happen, is it?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. And the one thing that I will say, and I don't know if I touched on it the last time, but I certainly would like to this time. The Democratic Party has such an advantage in Minnesota, is that they are traditionally a coalitions party. The Democrats and the Farmer Labor Party joined together to form a coalitions party. And in their history, the rich history of the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, they found a way to work out together. They found a way to work together. While the names may be different and the positions may be different, the type of scenario that you're describing of a Marco Rubio, a Jeb Bush, a Donald Trump, and Ted Cruz kind of together, you could find Democrats that would kind of fit into some of those similar roles in terms of where they fit on the political spectrums. But the Democrats have found a way to make it work. And what Republicans need to do is find a way to make it work. What you have going on in Washington, as much as Donald Trump, I think, would like to take credit for what occurred in the speaker's race, I don't think he had any impact whatsoever on what occurred. I think that there is a circus-like, carnival-like atmosphere that exists with some of these candidates. And ultimately, I hate to say it this way, but there are just some folks that just want the process to just kind of, metaphorically, just kind of burn down. And they want to see it just erupt in this chaos. We saw it, we've seen it before here at the state level, where those who think, shutting down state government is the best thing to do. I was listening to the radio right before I came in, quotes from Speaker Gingrich talking about how Republicans shutting down the government in 95, just galvanized and kind of cemented this narrative of Republicans being kind of stuck in their positions,
right,
unwilling to negotiate. And when it happened again, it is really kind of painted and presented a narrative about Republicans in terms of their ability to work together in a way that I don't think they've ever been able to really recover from. I think any government shutdown at the state or national level will always hurt Republicans more because of that shutdown that occurred during the Gingrich era.
Sure.
And when someone like Gingrich is able to look back and say it was a bad idea, you would think that Republicans now would be a little wiser about that strategy, and hopefully, the Democrats, and there is some dysfunction over on the Democratic side.
Yes.
But what's really taking the thunder away are the inability of Republicans to elect a caucus designee to be speaker,
right.
Who are they going to support, and other kind of mayhem inside the party.
Well, definitely, and I remember the '95 shutdown, and at the time, Bob Dole was thought to be the presumptive favorite to beat Bill Clinton for re-election, and when the shutdown happened, it all flipped, and it all came back to Clinton, obviously having almost a landslide victory in '96.
Sure. This is going to have an impact on how the presidential race is viewed in terms of the ability of Republicans to get their act together and to lead.
But again, the Democrats, we have the presumptive nominee, Hillary Clinton, not necessarily popular with all the Democrats out there. You have a definite, strong, challenge from the left, the hard left, in Bernie Sanders. That's going to be fascinating to see how that all comes together. And typically, it's the Democrats historically have been the most disorganized group. So this is quite a change.
It absolutely is, and if there wasn't this kind of drama out in Washington, I think that the issues with Hillary Clinton would be dominating the presidential race more. And there's only so much oxygen that can be dedicated to covering the races. And while Bernie Sanders, I think, is looked upon as the right now as generating the crowds and the enthusiasm, ultimately the muscle of the Democratic National Committee is behind Clinton.
Right.
And I think at this point, it's her race to lose. And I think for all the criticism that's out there about the number of debates and how protected Clinton is as a candidate, you can make an argument from a communication standpoint, from a messaging standpoint. That's a smarter way to do things than having this kind of free-for-all dynamic.
Right, exactly. Now, someone who's not on the ballot, but actually is President Obama.
Correct.
And how Hillary Clinton and the others react to the past 7 years here where Barack Obama has been president. Do you see him being a big factor in the election, that the Republicans might use, this is the third term for Obama, that sort of language? Or
I think they will. And ultimately, it's impossible for, I think, a second-term president to not be an issue when someone who is a part of his administration, whether it's Biden or Clinton,
right,
is running
exactly.
for that opportunity. I think we all may remember Clinton's long walk when he showed up at the Democratic National Convention in 2000 when they nominated Gore, and that kind of long speech. Presidential candidates, the incumbent president always looms over the nomination in the election cycle. The question, I think it all comes down to, is whether Americans will consider themselves to be better off than they were 8 years ago.
Right.
And Clinton, I think, will have the opportunity to cherry pick her involvement with the president. Clinton, while I think it's difficult, can look at a bit of being a good soldier for joining the administration after a heated contest. Ultimately, I think the President Obama, will be happy with whatever his role is in the race, whether they want to bring him. I think he will someone. It's surprising to think that the presidents, their skins get that kind of thick, but both Clinton, Bush, and Obama, I think will fall in as their predecessors have in terms of being comfortable with either being criticized when it's convenient or being praised when it's convenient.
Right.
And so
right.
that's just the nature, I think, of being a lame duck president when you can't run again and you want to have your party keep the office.
And there's always a big target on your back when you're in that office, no matter what.
Yes. If you want to not have a target on your back kind of politically and want to be kind of a lightning rod, don't run for president. Because it's a tough job.
Right, right.
It's a tough job.
So Michael, another topic people have been talking about lately is guns and gun violence. Obviously, we've had lots of events happening, tragedies across the country. Being from a Republican side of the fence, that point of view, when you hear people say, well, let's just ban guns. Obviously, that's not something that's practical in the United States with the Second Amendment. Do you have any thoughts on just politically where this might go? Not necessarily your personal opinions on it, but where you think the Republicans might, if there's some compromises happening, or what's happening behind the scenes that might take place?
Well, I think that this is one of it's a classic example of an issue that, for whatever the reason, gets bogged down in just the entrenched camps from the beginning. Discussing Second Amendment gun rights is almost as difficult as having a discussion about abortion rights in this country and then in this day and age. And it's a very difficult subject to discuss. And, you know, as a Republican, but also as a husband, as a father, it's difficult to talk about guns and to talk about the issue and not personalize it and to not talk about it in a serious way. I don't think anyone can look at what's occurred this year or in the last few years on the issue of guns and gun rights, the shootings, what we've seen all across this country, and think that the system is working. There is something wrong. And I think it would be nice if we could find an issue in this country that we could work towards in a thoughtful way. Mm-hmm. And whether it's the Second Amendment and guns, whether it's Social Security, whether it's discussion of abortion, whether it's any host of other issues, what needs to be done on some of these tough issues is there needs to be some thought brought into the conversation, right, and they need to be solution-based. And if anyone I don't think anyone on either side of this issue could think that the system is working and things are going the way they should. Obviously, in this country, there is a problem, an underlying issue with mental health issues. For Republicans, though, from the perspective of Republicans, if I could, to be credible on that issue, they need to take the underlying issue of mental health more seriously. I unfortunately have seen far too many times where Republicans only seem to want to talk about issues of mental health in the confines is discussed in such a way after a situation like this where there's a shooting, and they then want to come out and talk about the importance of dealing with mental health issues. Mental health issues are going on in this country whether or not there's a shooting involved. And for Republicans to want to be, I think, credible on the solution of dealing with the shootings and other issues related to it, they have to be leaders on the mental health issue. Mm-hmm. For Democrats, I think that they have to recognize and be more realistic about what are the limits that can be done with guns in the United States. It's been cited that there are over 315 million guns in the United States. I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult for me to comprehend how there's going to be a mass collection of all those guns while we still have a legal interpretation of the Second Amendment the way that we currently do. And so there has to be some compromise, both on the Republican side and on the Democratic side, if there's going to be some thought put into this issue. But both sides have to come to the table like they need to do on so many other issues, check their egos at the door, and recognize for the good of the country, right, something needs to be done.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more, and I think you're right on saying that something needs to happen, something different needs to be thought of, and I'm not sure if that's some sort of congressional committee. Of course, we're talking about Congress not being able to talk to each other, but some sort of study that's official that people can engage in a conversation. Maybe it takes until it's after the election cycle, but something needs to change.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I would say is and you and I are relatively the same age, if we would look at the issues that we first learned about in politics, how many of them have really been solved in the last 20-some years? Mm-hmm. And this issue, hopefully 20 years from now, we can look back at this time, and at some point I think there has to be a break in the dam, a break in this kind of overall political philosophy of how problems are solved. Mm-hmm. Because, there's tax reform, economies ebb and flow, but at the end of the day, are people feeling safer than they were 20 years ago? I know I don't feel much safer than I did 20 years ago. And I think when this starts to I hope it's not a situation where it has to get worse before it gets better, because I think it's been worse enough.
The only topic I can think of that would be solved that's this national tragedy is drunk driving,
Yep.
where you had the MAD group come out and laws were implemented, and we've seen that dramatically decrease. And it was tied to the ability to drive, your driver's license.
Absolutely correct.
Things like that. So I think Republicans, Democrats, no one wants to see their family member killed in a car crash with drunk driving. And that's something where across party lines, that was something that was solved. My son was involved in a possible school shooting here in Hastings when he was in junior high. And when the gunman tried to break in his classroom here at Hastings Middle School several years ago. Also, my brother in Phoenix was held up at gunpoint just drinking a coffee outside of Starbucks in Phoenix. So this can happen. It happens to my family. It happens to everyone's family. So I hope across the aisle we can reach some sort of agreement on gun violence.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah.
I think you make great points.
So here's the thought. Something I've noticed over the past 20 years or so is that Americans seem desperate to find someone to blame when anything bad happens. Chances are you've either heard or said the phrase, "Thanks, Obama," more than once. And before that, it was "Thanks, George." And while it's of course silly to suggest that either President Obama or Bush before him were to blame when you spilled your drink or broke your shoelace, there's unfortunately a little segment of our population on both sides of the political spectrum that casts blame much too quickly on the other guys or the other side of the aisle. Now, when Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana, some liberals protested and said President Bush was somehow to blame for not only the emergency response to the crisis, but the storm itself, as if the election of Al Gore would have somehow prevented the Category 5 hurricane from striking the Gulf Coast. By the same token, certain conservatives seem to have made a hobby out of blaming President Obama for everything from gas prices to terrorist attacks overseas. So why is this happening? One possibility is the 24/7 news cycle. It never used to be this way. 24 hours of pundits weighing in on everything from the economy to the price of gas to war in the Middle East. Or it could be the internet giving everyone who can type a megaphone to say whatever they like, spin conspiracy theories, and always find a smoking gun behind the scenes, being kept from the public by the mainstream media or the federal government itself. Now, this mentality has led to one of our leading presidential candidates being Donald Trump, a billionaire host of a reality show, and Hillary Clinton feeling like she needs to make an appearance on Saturday Night Live in order to remake her image. And if you think that's ridiculous, Kanye West, yes, a member of the Kardashian family, recently said he's thinking seriously of running for president in 2020. Now, I'm not exactly sure what will stop this type of rhetoric and division in our country, if anything, but I hope more people will take notice of this situation and demand that things change. When someone on TV or the web blames an entire ethnic population or religion for a problem in our society, call them out on it, and certainly don't send them any money or your political support. When someone turns a tragedy into a talking point for their own political point of view, take notice and consider the source. And please remember that the great majority of things are not conspiracies. Really. The only way we're going to rid ourselves of this nonsense is by getting involved, speaking out, and relying on your common sense. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on Everybody Loves Politics.